It was a dark and stormy night in the quiet town of Hallowbrook, nestled deep in the heart of Tennessee. I had just started my job as a gas station attendant at the Chevron station on the outskirts of town. The place was eerily quiet, save for the relentless patter of rain against the windows and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. The neon lights of the gas pumps flickered dimly, casting long, distorted shadows that danced across the wet pavement. As I settled into my small booth, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The fluorescent lights inside the station hummed softly, casting a sterile, almost clinical glow on the rows of snacks, drinks, and shelves of forgotten trinkets. The shelves held an array of items, from beef jerky to lottery tickets, each item seemingly untouched by human hands for days. My first customer of the night pulled up to pump number 3. I watched through the security camera feed as a beat-up old pickup truck rolled to a stop. The driver's side door creaked open, and a tall figure stepped out, wearing a tattered raincoat that seemed to blend with the storm. He moved slowly, as if weighed down by something more than just the rain. I grabbed the nozzle and headed out to pump 3. The rain was coming down in sheets, soaking me to the bone within seconds. The man was standing there, his face obscured by the hood of his raincoat. I couldn't see his features clearly, but I could feel the weight of his gaze as I approached. "Evening," I called out over the rain, my voice sounding oddly loud in the heavy silence. No response. I cleared my throat and repeated, "Evening, sir. How can I help you tonight?" The man's head tilted slightly, as if he was trying to make out my words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raspy. "Fill it up," he said, his words barely audible over the rain. I nodded, inserting the nozzle into the truck's gas tank. As the gas pumped, I couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that something was wrong. The man's gaze never wavered from me, and I could feel his eyes piercing through the darkness under the hood. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm. As the tank filled, I forced a smile and asked, "Are you passing through, or are you from around here?" The man's lips curled into the faintest semblance of a smile. "Just passing through," he replied, his voice trailing off. I finished fueling the truck and handed him the receipt. He took it with a gloved hand, the fingers long and bony. He nodded once and retreated back into the truck, the rain swallowing him whole. As he pulled away, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had just encountered something otherworldly. The night wore on, and the rain showed no signs of letting up. The station's harsh fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. My nerves were on edge, and every sound seemed amplified in the darkness. The distant hum of the highway was punctuated by the occasional rumble of thunder. Around midnight, a pair of headlights cut through the rain-soaked darkness. My heart raced as I watched the car approach, its tires splashing through puddles. The car pulled up to pump 2, and I could see a woman behind the wheel. Her face was obscured by the shadows, but I could make out the anxiety in her posture as she stepped out. I stepped out into the rain, my raincoat doing little to shield me from the relentless downpour. As I approached, I could see that the woman was shivering, her clothes clinging to her frame. "Rough night?" I asked, trying to sound as friendly as possible. She nodded, her teeth chattering. "Yeah, it's been a nightmare. Can you believe I got lost on Route 66? I chuckled sympathetically. "Happens to the best of us. Just let me know what you need, and I'll get you sorted out." As I fueled her car, the woman's gaze kept drifting to the edge of the woods that bordered the gas station. It was as if she was expecting something to emerge from the darkness at any moment. I followed her gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees rustled in the wind, their branches swaying like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to mask the unease in my voice. The woman tore her gaze away from the woods and forced a smile. "Yeah, just a bit jumpy, you know. This rain and all." I finished fueling her car and handed her the receipt. She took it with a shaky hand and glanced once more at the woods before hurrying back into her car. As she drove away, a sense of foreboding settled over me like a heavy fog. Hours passed, and the storm showed no signs of abating. I paced back and forth in the dimly lit station, my heart racing with each passing moment. The rain had turned into a constant drumming on the roof, a rhythmic reminder of the isolation and unease that gripped the gas station. Around 3 a.m., the silence was shattered by the blaring of a horn. Startled, I looked out the window to see a black SUV parked haphazardly at Pump 4. The headlights illuminated the pouring rain, creating a surreal scene that looked like something out of a nightmare. I grabbed an umbrella and headed out, my heart pounding against my chest. The rain was relentless, drenching me within seconds. I approached the SUV cautiously, my breath hitching as I saw a figure in the driver's seat. It was a man, his face partially obscured by the darkness within the car. "Hey there," I called out, my voice quivering. "Having trouble?" The man didn't respond. He simply pointed at the gas pump and gestured for me to start filling. As I grabbed the nozzle, a sudden gust of wind blew through, making the rain feel like icy needles against my skin. I glanced back at the man, expecting to see him getting out to pump his gas, but he remained seated. I hesitated for a moment before clearing my throat and asking, "Do you need any assistance?" The man's response was a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. He didn't sound human. Panic surged through me, and I dropped the nozzle, stumbling back a few steps. The man's eyes glowed a malevolent red in the dim light, and a guttural whisper echoed in my ears, "You shouldn't have come out." My heart raced, and I turned to run back to the safety of the station. But as I reached the entrance, a piercing howl echoed through the storm, a sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. I turned back to the SUV, my breath catching in my throat. The man was no longer in the car. Instead, a monstrous creature stood in his place. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its limbs were long and contorted, like something out of a nightmare. It moved with an unnatural grace, its form seeming to shift and warp in the rain. I stumbled back, my mind racing for a plan. As I fumbled for my phone to call the police, the creature lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air. I barely managed to dodge its attack, my heart pounding in my chest. Adrenaline surged through me as I sprinted back into the station, slamming the door shut behind me. I frantically locked the door and turned to look at the security camera feed. The creature was outside, its eyes fixed on the station with a malevolent hunger. Its presence seemed to fill the air, suffocating and oppressive. I paced back and forth in the station, my mind racing for a way out. The rain continued to pour, and the creature prowled outside, its presence like a nightmare come to life. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. I knew I couldn't stay trapped in the station forever. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone and dialed 911. My voice shook as I explained the situation, my words coming out in a hurried jumble. The dispatcher's voice was calm and reassuring, but even over the phone, I could sense the unease in their tone. As I hung up, a loud crash echoed through the station. I spun around to see the creature had smashed through the glass door, its eyes fixed on me with a hunger that sent a chill down my spine. Panic surged through me, and I backed away, my heart racing. I grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, my fingers trembling as I held it like a makeshift weapon. The creature advanced slowly, its form contorting and shifting with each step. I could feel its malevolence radiating off of it, a palpable force that seemed to drain the very air from the room. With a scream, I charged at the creature, swinging the fire extinguisher with all my might. The metal connected with its form, and for a moment, it seemed to falter. But then, with a roar that shook the walls, it lunged at me. Its claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing me as I ducked and rolled away. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, desperate for any means of escape. The fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the scene before me. I spotted a hatch in the floor, a narrow access to the station's crawl space. Without a second thought, I wrenched the hatch open and crawled in, pulling it shut behind me. The space was cramped and suffocating, but at least I was out of the creature's reach. I could hear it prowling above, its heavy footsteps sending vibrations through the floor. Time seemed to stretch as I huddled in the darkness, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the rain outside, the sound like a distant memory. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the creature's growls and snarls growing fainter. It seemed to be leaving, its malevolent presence receding like a nightmare. I waited a while longer, my breath coming in shaky gasps. Eventually, I mustered the courage to crawl out of the crawl space. The station was a mess, shattered glass and overturned shelves a testament to the terror that had unfolded. The rain had finally stopped, and a pale light was beginning to creep over the horizon. As I stepped outside, I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. The storm had passed, and the gas station was bathed in an eerie calm. But the memory of the creature's malevolent presence lingered, a chilling reminder that some nightmares were all too real. I never returned to that gas station, and I never spoke of that night to anyone. The town of Hallowbrook remained quiet and unassuming, its residents unaware of the terror that had unfolded on that fateful night. But in the depths of my nightmares, the glowing eyes of the creature haunted me, a reminder that some horrors were far beyond human comprehension. Hey, Reddit. I'm Jake, and I've been working at a gas station in the small town of Elmridge, Oregon, for as long as I can remember. Nights are usually quiet around here, but what happened last month has me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. I've read plenty of scary stories on this platform, but what I experienced that night was beyond anything I could have imagined. It was a Wednesday evening, the kind of evening where the sky seemed to be painted with shades of orange and purple as the sun set over the sleepy town. I was settling into my usual routine at the gas station, situated right off Route 66. The bell above the door jingled as it always did, announcing the arrival of my first customer for the night. The customer's name was Walter, an older man who had lived in Elmridge his whole life. He had a friendly face, and we often chatted about the weather or local events while he filled up his tank. As he was leaving that night, he leaned in a little closer and said, "Jake, you be careful tonight. There's something strange in the air." I chuckled, thinking he was just trying to spook me, but the atmosphere did feel different that night. A cold wind blew through, and the rustling leaves cast eerie shadows on the ground. I shook off the unsettling feeling, attributing it to Walter's playful warning. Hours passed, and the night deepened. The usual flow of customers dwindled, leaving me alone with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of cars passing by. I was lost in thought, gazing out the window at the dimly lit street, when I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. A figure stood under a flickering streetlight across the road. It was too far away to make out any details, but I could tell that it wasn't moving. I tried to rationalize it as a pedestrian waiting for a ride or perhaps someone who had lost their way. Still, the longer I stared, the more I felt a sense of unease settle over me. I turned my attention back to the tasks at hand, trying to push the eerie image from my mind. But as the clock struck midnight, the gas station's lights flickered, casting an eerie glow across the aisles. I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I tried to convince myself it was just an electrical glitch. Just then, the bell above the door chimed, signaling the arrival of a customer. I looked up to see a woman standing in the doorway, her face obscured by the shadows of her hood. She wore a long, tattered coat that seemed out of place in the mild Oregon weather. "Evening," I greeted her, my voice quivering slightly. "Can I use your phone?" she asked in a soft, almost whisper-like tone. "Sure thing," I replied, gesturing toward the counter where the payphone was located. As she approached, a chill ran down my spine. There was something off about her, something that made my instincts scream at me to be cautious. But I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to dismiss my unease, attributing it to the late hour and the strange events of the night. The woman picked up the payphone, dialing a number that seemed oddly long. I pretended to busy myself with restocking shelves, all the while stealing glances at her. She spoke in hushed tones, her words unintelligible. It was as if she was having a conversation with someone who wasn't on the other end of the line. As she hung up the phone, she turned to me, her eyes piercing through the shadows of her hood. "Thank you," she said softly before turning to leave. "Wait," I called out impulsively. "Are you all right? Do you need a ride somewhere?" She paused, her head tilting slightly as if considering my offer. "No," she finally replied, her voice sending shivers down my spine. "I just needed a moment to rest. But now, I must continue my journey." With that, she stepped back out into the night, disappearing into the darkness. I watched her go, a sense of dread settling over me like a heavy fog. The gas station felt eerily silent after she left. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnatural about her, something beyond my understanding. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the strange events of the night, but no logical explanation seemed to fit. I walked over to the window and glanced outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman or the figure I had seen earlier. But the street was empty, bathed in the pale glow of the moonlight. Just as I was about to turn away, movement caught my eye. In the distance, under the same flickering streetlight, I saw the figure again. It was closer now, but the shadows still concealed its features. My heart raced as I watched it, paralyzed by a mixture of fear and fascination. It seemed to be watching me, its presence a haunting reminder of the inexplicable events that had unfolded. Summoning every ounce of courage, I grabbed a flashlight from behind the counter and stepped out into the night. The cold wind cut through my jacket, but my determination overpowered the discomfort. As I approached the figure, its details slowly became clearer. It was a man, his clothes tattered and worn. His eyes were empty voids, and his skin seemed unnaturally pale, as if drained of life. I stopped a few feet away, the beam of my flashlight illuminating his face. "Hey, are you all right?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't respond, his gaze fixed on me with a haunting intensity. Suddenly, he raised a bony hand and pointed towards the gas station. I followed his gaze, my heart sinking as I saw the gas station itself, surrounded by an otherworldly glow. The building seemed to shift and contort, its walls twisting and warping as if caught in a surreal nightmare. I stumbled back, the flashlight slipping from my grasp as I watched in horror. The gas station was transforming before my eyes, becoming something twisted and alien. I stumbled back, my mind reeling from the impossible sight. The figure stepped closer, his movements unnatural and unsettling. The air itself seemed to thicken, suffocating me as a sense of unreality enveloped everything around me. Desperate to escape the nightmare, I turned and ran towards the gas station, hoping to find refuge within its walls. But as I reached for the door, my hand passed through it as if it were made of mist. I recoiled, my heart racing as I realized that the gas station, the only place that should have offered safety, was now as intangible as a dream. The figure drew nearer, its presence suffusing the air with an oppressive weight. I stumbled back, my breath ragged as I tried to make sense of the impossible situation I found myself in. As I looked around, I saw that the world itself was unraveling, the very fabric of reality tearing apart. In a panic, I turned and fled from the gas station, my footsteps echoing in the void-like emptiness around me. The figure pursued me, its steps silent but relentless. I ran through the streets of Elmridge, the town twisting and distorting with every step I took. Buildings shifted and morphed, streets vanished and reappeared, and the sky itself seemed to writhe in agony. It was a nightmarish landscape that defied all logic and reason. I stumbled over uneven ground, my heart pounding as I struggled to escape the inexorable grip of the unseen force. Just when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I saw a glimmer of light in the distance. It was the gas station, its familiar facade standing in stark contrast to the nightmarish chaos that surrounded it. With a surge of determination, I sprinted towards it, my legs burning with exertion. As I reached the entrance, I threw myself inside, collapsing onto the floor in a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I looked around, half expecting to find the twisted reality I had just escaped from, but instead, I was met with the familiar sight of the gas station's interior. Days have passed since that night, and I can't shake the memory of what I experienced. I've scoured the internet for answers, but there's no explanation for the surreal events I witnessed. I've tried to share my story with others, but most dismiss it as a product of stress or fatigue. Yet, I know what I saw was real. I know that there are forces beyond our comprehension, lurking in the shadows of our world. The gas station remains unchanged, and the nights are quiet once more. But every time I look at that flickering streetlight across the road, I'm reminded of the figure that stood there, a messenger from a realm beyond our understanding. So, here I am, sharing my story with you, Reddit. Maybe someone out there has experienced something similar, or maybe my words will serve as a warning to those who encounter the unexplainable. Whatever the case, I'll never forget that night, the night I crossed paths with the unseen and glimpsed the terrifying truth that lies just beyond our reality.